Have you ever thought about using Clip Studio Paint? I use it all the time in my own artwork, and it's so similar to Photoshop that I don't feel like I'm missing much. You can keep all your stored work inside of their system with a easy way to access it, as well as on your desktop. They also have these assets that make your painting so much easier to do. People share these assets on the asset store, like brushes and scenery and models and textures and all sorts of different things. So if you scroll through, you can find probably anything you're looking for. I personally like to go to drawing and painting and get materials from there specifically. And you can see here that there's a lot of textures and brushes available with samples from each of the users who created them as to what those are like. And then you can also go into the search and look up different types of things if you want to look specifically for brushes or textures. But going back into the Paint program itself, if you open up Paint, you get into the main interface, and this is what it looks like. Fairly similar to Photoshop, although I have mine customized a little bit more to be friendly to what I like to do, which is paint. So if I want to start a new file, there's a lot of different options available here, different file types. I usually stick with illustration, and you can come down here and look at the size of the document and the resolution. I have mine set to 400, but usually you can set yours to 300 dpi, and that's the lowest I would recommend you putting it at. You can also change the color of the background right when you start. I keep it somewhere around a mid-tone gray so that I have the ability to go higher in value or lower in value. And once you're satisfied, you click OK, and then your new document is created. You can zoom in and out, you can move around, just like any other sort of art program. Now on the right here we have layers, and layers are pretty standard in any sort of digital art program, and you can add as many as you like. I don't think there's a limit. I haven't found one anyway. I've used a bunch. And over here you've got your brushes and your tools. All in that left side column is a whole range of different brush categories. So if I start drawing here with a standard pencil, you can turn that visibility on and off for that layer in the layer panel on the right, just like any other program. And if you don't like that layer very much, you can go over to the trash can on the right and delete. It asks if you're sure you want to delete, and you say yes, and then that layer is gone. So going back into the brushes, I have a bunch downloaded onto my system. Brushes that I've collected over time, brushes from the store, as well as brushes that I've imported from artists who make Photoshop brushes. They all work on here if you import them. Some may have some differences, but usually they all work pretty close to the same as they do in Photoshop. So if we start over here with oil paint, this is one of my favorite go-to brushes. You can see as I draw here that it gives us a pretty natural look and feel to the stroke. It's got tapering, it's got texture, it's just a really nice brush. You can change the color and see what kind of changes you can get when you apply those two contrasting pieces together. If you take the time after you've laid in your color to brush in a certain way from the previous color to the new color, you can see that it blends. It mixes those colors together very gently and nicely. You can see the difference here from the outside of the shape to the inside of the shape. And it changes the opacity with that brush depending on how thick or light I press. And then if you use something like a blend tool here, you could soften up those edges and make the transition much more smooth and gradual, rather than something that's very harsh. And you can even blend in from the outside where there isn't any paint and smush that paint around with a blend brush. This is something that I feel Clip Studio does a bit better than Photoshop, and I really, really like using blend brushes. There's a whole bunch of other tools over here. You've got your standard fill and selections and ink dropper and all those different kinds of tools that you might be used to. So we'll start with the fill, and we'll pick a color. Let's go with the blue. We can fill in the entire background outside of the shape. There it is. And then if we want to make something else, it also has your standard selection tools. So it's got a lasso fill, it's got rectangle, lines, polygons, Bezier curves. These are all really cool. Now, if I make a lasso tool shape here, it's not going to do what you think. Because this is a lasso fill, and I have the color of the background selected, when I finish this square, it looks like nothing happened. But there is in fact a shape there. So what I need to do is I need to go in and I need to select a new color. And then, sorry about that. And then once I have that new color selected, I can make my new shape. And there we go. Now you can see it. Both shapes are visible. So if I want to go to a new layer, we can do what's called a mask. And what a mask does is it takes the new layer and it paints directly inside of the layer beneath, and only that layer. So if you hold down Control on a PC or Command on a Mac, and you click the layer beneath the layer that you have selected, just the icon for the image of the layer, you'll get these dotted ants that march along the edges of the objects of that layer. And if I paint inside with a different color, you'll see that no matter where my brush goes, it only stays inside of the selected shapes when I paint. So that's what a mask does. Inside, because these are still selected, I can also come in and I can stretch and mold these shapes around. I can scale them. And you'll notice that because this is part of a masking layer, when I stretch and scale them, they actually go outside of the selections. And so if you like what you've done, you can click OK, but otherwise you can click Cancel. And then when you wanted to deselect your objects, you can click the Deselect button. So these are some of the features that I like to use the most and I find to be the most helpful inside of Clip Studio Paint and are most similar to Photoshop. Let's take a look at one of my previous pieces that I've painted in the past inside of Clip Studio Paint, and you can see a more fully rendered image and what this program is capable of producing. I think I'll stick with a flamingo piece. Yeah, let's go with the flamingo. Okay, so once you have your file opened, right, you can see all the layers that I have. And I'll just go ahead and start turning them off so you can see all the different layers and their various effects throughout my painting progress. This is a painting I finished a while ago. So the more I turn off in terms of visibility, the more unfinished it looks. You can go all the way back down to the beginning. All these different details are on their own layers. Now the flamingo has disappeared. You can kind of see a silhouette, but it's because we're on the layers beneath the flamingo. And you can adjust those layers at any time just by clicking and dragging and moving them around. So now if we turn the flamingo back on, now you can see you start adding those pieces back and it starts to look like a flamingo again. I won't go ahead and add all those back, but that's essentially what you can do. Now, one of the really cool things about Clip Studio Paint is that it can open and export Photoshop files. It can also export time lapses. So as long as you have the record time lapse box checked, it will automatically, with any painting that you make, create a time lapse of your work. Just make sure that you don't uncheck it, because then it will delete whatever time lapse it has stored. So in here, it allows you to save or export as a Photoshop document or a big Photoshop document. And the other thing you can do is you can go to Save As, and it allows you those same options. This is my preferred method rather than exporting, just because it's a little faster in the processing. But essentially, that's how I use this program, and those are some of the main reasons I love it so much. If you're considering getting it or trying it out, they usually offer free trials, and I highly recommend it. Hope you learned something. Have a great day.